Just a few technical reminding notes before we get started. If you experience any issues with your audio or video during the conference, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. If you have any questions for our speakers or panel members, please do feel free to post your questions on the video wall, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. We will share with our speaker at the end of the session, and they will reply to you through the video wall or through the email afterwards. If you'd like to connect with our speakers, please move to the home lobby page. You can find the speaker by typing their names under Networking tab on the right-hand corner of your screen. We welcome all of our audience to interact with each other through our networking features. And also, please feel free to tag us on our social media handles with the hashtag AIMDigital. Greetings, everybody. On behalf of the UAE Ministry of Economy and the annual investment meeting, we would like to welcome you all to the second day of Annual Investment Meeting Digital 2020. Welcome to Startup Pillar at the Etisalat Auditorium. My name is Yasmin Shah, and I'll be your MC for today. In this Startup Pillar today, we will continue to explore topics like investors' investment trends, future of fintech, health tech, and importance of e-commerce. And we have an excellent lineup of speakers and experts who will share their great insights on this. Before we sit and explore with our startup experts, I'd like to mention a few technical reminding notes. If you experience any issues with your audio or video during the webinar, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. All right, let's dive into the upcoming panel session. For today's panel, we have gathered top VCs from the Middle East and Asia region to discuss the topic, investors, investment, and fundraising trends. This session will be moderated by Ibrahim Seksek, who is the COO of MENA and Russia for Rainmaking. Ibrahim, the stage is yours.
Hello and welcome to AIM. We are talking with a great panel today. We're discussing investors, fundraising, and investment trends. My name is Ibrahim Seksek, known as Abe. I am the CEO of Rainmaking, MENA, and Russia, who also owns Startup Bootcamp in the region. And I am currently heading up the Venture Studio. I'd like to introduce everybody on this panel, but I'd like everybody to introduce themselves, plus maybe a couple of sentences on what they do exactly. Then I'm going to give it to you, Sonia.
All right, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well. My name is Sonia Weymuller. I'm a founding partner at VentureSouq. VentureSouq is an early stage investment platform. We focus on early stage tech-enabled businesses globally. We have a portfolio of almost 160 companies now from around the world. And I guess my area of focus these days is the new conscious investment vehicle that we recently launched, and we'll talk about it a bit more with Abe. And I'm looking forward to joining you all.
Fantastic. Hasan?
Yeah, hi, my name's Hasan. I'm a co-founder of PLUS.VC and a managing partner there. It's an early stage venture capital firm that's focused on investments in the MENA region. Before that, I was a managing partner at 500 startups here in the MENA region for the last 5 years. We ended up investing in over 180 startups over the past 3 years. And yeah, I've done a lot of investments and looking forward to do more.
Sounds great. And Raja?
Hi everyone, thanks AIM for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Raja, the founder of RHL Ventures, an early stage investment fund based out of Malaysia, where we invest across the whole Southeast Asian region. The most active investors based on Malaysia's different sectors. We operate about $50 million worth of assets, and happy to share any of the experiences we have in both Asia, Southeast Asia, and whatever the audience or the people in the panel want to speak about.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for everybody. Okay, so let's start this. I know everybody has some interesting and exciting news. So who would like to go first?
Hasan.
Hasan, I think Hasan, everybody votes Hasan to go first.
Well, what would you like to talk about?
Well, your interesting new news, because I know you've had an announcement just a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago. So let's talk about that. first.
Sure. So we've launched a new firm that's focused on investing in the MENA region again. We're doubling down on what we believe in, really. We felt a lot of impact from the seed stage investments that we did here. And honestly, there's no other market I'd rather be investing in. And so we're doubling down. We're going to be investing, raising a fund to invest in seed stage startups across the MENA region. And we'll be supplementing the investment with sort of a structured program to support all of the companies that we invest in. So it won't just be like one-offs. It'll be a huge suite of sort of online learning and mentorship and advice to the companies that we invest in. So pretty excited about all that. For the first time, actually setting up something for myself. I'm in the same shoes that the founders that pitched me are in, and it's been a pretty amazing experience. We're looking to use a lot of technology in PLUS.VC in order to make sure that whatever we can automate gets automated, whatever support we can provide sort of through a one-to-many scale sort of situation, we can through, the power of all the tech that we're going to be employing. That's been a really fun experience.
Okay, sounds great. And you said it's seed? Are you all investing in seed level, or is it a multi-level? Or...
Yeah, so our initial investment, we're targeting to do about $200,000 at seed stage for startups across the MENA region, also with MENA diaspora. So if there's founders that are from the MENA region and other markets, we'll be able to invest with them. We don't have a sector sort of focus. We'll invest across different sectors as long as there's some tech in that startup that'll allow it to scale and grow. Our first check will be once a company has launched a product and has some customers or users, so there's some sort of market validation. And then we'll follow on in the top 20% of companies up to like $1 million in our follow-on. There's a lot of learnings that we've had over the past few years, and we're trying to implement that into the way that we invest. One thing that's been quite annoying is startups in the region just aren't raising enough at seed to get to Series A milestones. And they'll raise $200,000-$300,000. They'll be like, yeah, this is enough. We don't want to dilute ourselves anymore. But it's just not enough to get them to the metrics that a Series A investor would want. And so we're going to be a bit more intentional about putting rounds together, making sure the startup raises $500,000 to $1 million at seed to get to Series A without an endless number of bridge rounds forever and ever and ever and staying at seed forever.
Believe me, I've been there so many times. So it's something definitely resonates. And I know we're talking about impact. I know Sonia has some new news. So can you share those ideas?
Yeah, sure. So we launched, I guess on the VentureSouq side, news-wise, we launched an impact-focused vehicle. I don't use the word impact actually because I feel like it's overused. So I talk about conscious investing. But so we launched a vehicle in March amidst the pandemic. It wasn't intentional, just I guess pure synchronicity in hindsight that it happened then. And it's the first, I guess in my view, it's the first impact vehicle really coming out of this region focused on looking at deals exactly the same way that commercially Hasan or VentureSouq would look at deals. We're just hyper-focused on sectors that we feel are maybe underserved from a capital injection standpoint. So looking at environmental technologies, agricultural technologies, financial inclusion enabled by tech, health tech and ed tech. It's a global remit. We've made 8 investments so far. We're focusing on seed to Series A. So we've made 2 Series A investments, 1 pre-Series A, and the rest have been seed. Global, again, so from around the world. We've so far invested in Africa, Indonesia, the US, and Europe. On the lookout for MENA. So anyone here listening as a company is sent my way. We actually have a pretty big pipeline of MENA companies, but none of them really kind of met our threshold so far. So really 2020 for me was focused on educating the market. When you think about this space, it's still a bit behind in terms of being very two-pocket thinking driven. So very deep pockets in this region, but very deep pockets for philanthropy versus very deep pockets for profit, commercial investments. What we're trying to do is kind of show that we're at the nexus of that and that you can invest in companies that are going to have a meaningful, positive impact on the world, on our societies, on the environment, etc., and also make a financial return at the same time. And as VentureSouq, we actually have 6 companies that we had invested into previously that would have fit the conscious collective mandate to prove that. And now we have an additional 8, and we'll probably make another 3 to 4 investments by the end of the year. Because the focus is on educating the market, we actually just launched, so that's back to your announcement. We announced last week that we launched Conscious Investor Fellowship. I didn't want this to be just another chest thumping, we are Dubai, we are Abu Dhabi, we are Bahrain, we are KAUST. I really wanted this to be a pan-regional initiative for really entities to come together. And so was very happy to see NYU Abu Dhabi join, KAUST joined, Shura joined, and Hub 71. We didn't have a Bahrain entity join, Hasan, but we do have a Bahraini fellow who's joined. So, so that's good. We've invited 25, well, actually the target was 25 investors, but we were oversubscribed. So we're at 32 now. High profile kind of, investors, either from a corporate background, family office background, individual angel investor background, or government who are interested in investing in this space. But don't necessarily have the tools or don't feel like they're equipped to do so. So it's literally kind of almost like an investor acceleration program, but focused on the impact space. And I'm very happy to say that it's 65% female investors. So so this is great for us as well. So that's, I guess, the major announcement. We're starting on Wednesday, the 6-week program. And then the idea is that, inshallah, this is the first cohort, and then we'll do another cohort next year, and we'll start building up this base from the ground up.
Sounds very interesting, and I'd love to know more. I'm sure we're going to connect after. Raja?
Hey everyone. Just a quick one. So we've invested in quite about 20 plus deals across the whole Southeast Asia. And I would first say that in Southeast Asia, now such an extremely exciting time for both from a venture perspective, also from a capital perspective, right? We look at this year itself, the value of fundraising deals in the region has grown about 91%. And there's been similar numbers that you've seen over the past few years. So I could say that it's pretty much growing exponentially. And with what's happening with the US and China, you do see more investor interest come to the region. Obviously, given the huge demographics, which 600 million population, obviously focus on Indonesia and Vietnam and the interest there. So from us as a fund, what we do is we have to be opportunistic in this COVID environment. Obviously, travel gets much harder where you don't have teams on the ground to do due diligence, which is a big difficulty in this time, but you just make do what you have. For us personally, we invested in a deal in Vietnam during COVID period. We invested in a deal in Indonesia. So where we did diligence through online methods such as Zoom, also cross-checking other VCs. So I think in this market, I find that obviously the winners become even stronger winners and vice versa, right? So as an investor, whether I would say you're in Middle East, you're in Asia, the US, I still think in the private markets, it's a great time to invest. So I'm happy to share any specific deals that we've done, any specific sectors. We invest across all sectors. Given that we do find opportunities across many sectors. So happy to share more as needed.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a bit of news, actually. I know I'm the moderator, but I can actually add to that as well. But, I work for Rainmaking, and Rainmaking is essentially a boutique tech firm. We own the brand Startup Bootcamp, but, we've seen the ecosystem, especially the startup ecosystem, really mature. And, if I can tell you, 3 years ago when we ran our first cohort here, we had a couple of hundred applications, and I think only 100 from the region, while our last program, the Smart City one, had around 1,200 applications, and almost 900 applications just come from the region, and 600 come from the UAE. So obviously the ecosystem has been nourished enough to, and so what we decided on, we're actually gonna start adding more services. What we do globally, we're getting into that venture builder model with some of our corporate partners, because some of our corporate partners also now want skin in the game and they want to be a part of this ecosystem. And that's something we've had a lot of conversations with a lot of offices here, whether corporate or family offices, and they've been progressing very nicely as well. And you'll hear something soon, hopefully by the end of the year. Okay, great. Sounds great. So I have to address the elephant in the room, COVID, obviously. So You know, how did we change? How did our lives change, especially on investing? Because, you know, keep in mind, like SBC has almost 100 companies in MENA in their portfolio. I know, Hasan, you managed, you know, the 500 startups portfolio in this region, and I know Sonia as well. You guys manage a lot of companies. How did that really affect, you know, the investing? You know, because, you know, what's happening? Did you change your criterias? Did you look into different specific industries after COVID? And I also would love to hear you know, what happened in Southeast Asia as well, because we do have offices in Singapore that we've seen trends change as well. Who would like to start with this?
Sonia?
Hasan.
I knew it. Sure. I mean, I think, so I guess from my perspective, obviously everyone freaked out initially. I mean, everyone was just like, what is happening? I think we did our last kind of VentureSouq event in March, on March 10th. That was the last physical event. And even then it was kind of like, wow, you guys are still, so we had lots of sanitizer there, but it wasn't like what it is now, right? And it was in Abu Dhabi. And then pretty much I started working from home 2 days later, essentially. So that was kind of, so I guess there was kind of a waiting period, I think, through, you know, half of March, April, maybe up to the beginning of May, where I think there was a bit of a pause button as people were trying to get their heads around what exactly was happening. And so we saw that obviously with some of our investors who were just like, hold on, like, give me a bit of time. Then obviously the stock market was plunging and then people were losing money. So it was just like, okay, this is not the right time to be chasing people for money on the investor side. On the startup side, what was interesting is that as investors, when a company is pitching us, we're always asking them, so like, how quickly can you scale, right? It's all about scaling up all the time, right? Now the question was, how quickly can you scale down? And so I think that was kind of a bit of a wake-up call. I mean, I think Hasan and Raja can kind of chime in, but like, you know, that was kind of like, oh, wow, like, you know, this is actually something we should think about, because I don't think any of us, we're all pretty young. Like, I don't think any of us have seen something like this before maybe happen, where we need to actually factor in how quickly and malleable a company is in order to actually reduce costs and scale down and basically kind of extend that runway, whatever they may have raised. If they raised a while ago, then they're feeling a bit nervous maybe. If they just recently raised, maybe they're feeling more comfortable because they have a longer runway, really trying to make that runway last as long as possible, given the uncertainty that we're all surrounded by. So I thought, for me at least, that was interesting, because that was kind of a new question that I was at and I think this is going to be part of our reality now, right? Now, any company that we're going to be looking at moving forward, we'll be like, okay, cool, like how fast can you scale up, but how fast can you scale down as well, should there, may God forbid, be another kind of event like this in our lifetime. So I would say, I guess that's kind of my high level macro, you know, kind of tidbit. Obviously we can go into like, yes, of course we saw acceleration in the fintech space and the edtech space, cybersecurity. I mean, there's all these different, I don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel, because I'm sure most of the audience has probably heard this from different sources or read this through different outlets. But that, I guess, is my personal, I guess, viewpoint on my experience as an investor, especially at that you know, initial time. I think now we're at a point where people are used to this now. It's a new reality. You know, it's whatever. What is it? October 5th. I'm still working from home. My cat is very happy, and I'm actually quite enjoying it. And I think that we've gotten used to, you know, taking Zoom calls kind of nonstop 24/7. I think some of us maybe are facing issues, especially myself included, around kind of the boundaries that you set, you know, from a kind of a work-life balance, because you're basically eating, living, and dreaming Zoom calls now. I've actually dreamt of Zoom calls, which is a bit concerning. So, you know, I think it's also a time of reflection for us as investors in terms of making sure that we also stay sane, and that we don't let kind of this new reality seep into our you know, our personal lives essentially as well.
Sounds great. I 100% agree. Like the whole Zoom thing had to stop. I was even getting excited when somebody sends a new platform. Oh, let me check this out, you know, like Google Hangout or whatever. And talking about dreaming, I actually dreamt that I was on a plane yesterday, which is because I haven't been on a plane for a while. So it's actually kind of, I'm like, maybe I kind of missed it. I know in the beginning, I'm like, yeah, it's nice to stay and not to travel. But now, I don't know. I guess some old habits can.
Well, I mean, you can go on a treadmill with a suitcase and pretend that you're in an airport.
Yeah, no, I'll pass. I'll pass on that. That's for sure. Hasan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been generally the same as what Sonia is talking about. With regards to us, like we ended investments and didn't have any dry powder by, before the pandemic sort of hit. So it didn't really affect our investment pace because there was none. But now with the new fund, I mean, it's really interesting because the quality of the deal flow that I'm getting is much better than it was prior to the pandemic. So a founder that is actively fundraising and working on their startups during all of this and is like talking to investors and everything, I feel like that's a quality bar that wasn't there before the pandemic, where everyone and just felt like, oh, this is a new thing to do, let me do a startup. Everyone from any industry would just be like, oh, I'll do a startup. And so now it's like, no, it's not the easiest thing. It's actually really hard because of the pandemic. So the quality is actually improved quite a bit of the founders that we're looking at and the deals that we have right now in our pipeline. So that's actually been a pretty positive thing. And the other thing is that when we made our initial investments, we had this sort of thesis that, within the next 3 to 5 years, online adoption would increase, online payments would increase, there'd be people that'll start using things online more. That 3 to 5 year period just got compressed into like just a few hours as soon as the lockdown sort of took place in most countries around the region. And so that actually was a really amazing accelerant for the startups in our portfolio. So quite a few of our startups really benefited quite significantly from sort of the COVID situation. But having said that, it was also an accelerant for pre-existing issues. So if there was a startup that already had issues raising or had issues internally with their founders or whatever, this just accelerated the pace at which those issues would make the company die. Like basically that's what sort of happened. We're fundraising for a new fund during the pandemic, so we're actually pretty optimistic about what's going to happen going forward. And we really believe in venture capital, you typically have a 10-year cycle because the funds are 10-year funds. So having a recession or whatever, like a downturn right at the beginning while you're investing is probably the best time to have it, rather than when you're trying to like sort of sell and exit your businesses. So I think, timing wise, this is actually a pretty good time to start investing. And we've seen a little bit of a shift as well amongst sort of investor sentiment. I think not all asset classes, like most asset classes, people aren't really interested in investing anymore, but tech in particular, a lot of conglomerates and families, they got hit quite hard with their, offline businesses and everything, that they're looking to digitize quite quickly. They realize that they're completely left without any solutions or resolutions in case anything happens again. And so we've seen some interest in M&A activity in smaller scales from some of these sort of conglomerates and families. We've seen them interested in engaging with tech and VC funds, whereas before the pandemic there was no interest at all. And so generally, I think the pandemic has been a pretty interesting period for everyone, but for tech and the startup ecosystem in the region especially, it's actually probably been a really good accelerant. I mean, me personally, it sucked because I caught it in March and I was hospitalized. But like other than that, it's everything else is fine.
Are you immune now? For a bit?
Who knows?
There's no such thing as immunity for COVID, supposedly. Anyway.
And Raja, like, what did you see, in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia?
I think for Southeast Asia, right, we just take one proxy, which is like C Group, which is this New York Stock Exchange listed e-commerce and gaming company focused on Southeast Asia. And their market cap at the start of the year was $17 billion, and the market cap now is $75 billion. So they've 4x their stock in a matter of 9 months. So, I mean, if it's a venture investment, I mean, I'll be very happy, right, if I put a dollar there. But I think a couple of things during COVID, right? One is, if you're in the sectors that benefit from it, whether it's e-commerce, gaming, ed tech, healthcare, you do extremely well, right? So we've had portfolio companies in both the healthcare space and also the e-commerce space whose numbers have gone to all-time highs. And on the flip side, we have companies in sectors such as more retail-related sectors. So we invest in a coffee company, for example, that does coffee kiosks that you order everything on the app. So obviously it's a more brick and mortar idea, but at the same time it's a tech-enabled solution. They've struggled mightily throughout this time. So the winners get bigger quickly, and at the same time, the guys who are not doing well will obviously suffer tremendously. And the effect is magnified because of point two, which is investor interest. I think at the start, the first maybe 3 months from March onwards, I think investors were just staying on the side. We've had portfolio companies who raise capital in this time who take a much longer time to close the investment because investors come back and they say, hey, I was valued at 40 before, but maybe now I want a 30 million valuation, right? So as a company, it's very hard to negotiate in a time where you actually already signed term sheets when investors are changing their minds. So investors, I think first 3 months, they're scared. They all want to renegotiate valuations. I think from, let's say, July onwards, I do see a trend where investors maybe have been on silence for too long. They still have capital to deploy and they become more aggressive. And this means that the amount of capital, as shown, the data I've shown earlier, which is there's still a lot of capital coming into this space. So it's how do you manage that split? So obviously what happens is the companies who are strong will attract most of the capital interest. But if you're 50-50 or you're not doing too well, I give an example, someone like Traveloka, which is a travel booking platform, a unicorn in Southeast Asia. They are going through a tough time. They have to fire people. They've had to restructure. I think they raised the down round based on news reports. So you just have to make do with what you have, right, in this market. But the capital is still there. The allocation to tech or allocation to venture is still there by most institutional investors. This is how you tap it, and you have to be very smart about it. I think the interesting part, I'm in Malaysia now, and we've basically, things are relatively back to normal because cases have been okay. So like, for example, I'm actually doing this call from my office, and just 2 weeks ago, I had an investor from Singapore who flew down. There's a reciprocal green lane from Singapore to Malaysia where you have to just swap in Singapore and Malaysia when you arrive, and vice versa when you go back. And so here, he came to meet us and he was looking at some direct investments as well. So I think as an investor also, these small nuances change, but there's also opportunities where if there's still deals to be done. If not, people won't travel, right? So it's a weird environment to be in, but there's always anecdotes of success stories that's nice to hear.
Oh, great to hear. And I think everybody in the room mentioned this point. They clearly touched on this. Like we did it as well with our portfolio companies, where we had the session, bringing everybody on this session saying, let's control your burn. That's the term. Like, okay, I'm an old school entrepreneur, so I keep, every investor keep telling me, control your burn, control your burn. And some of them were like spending money on marketing where they knew they didn't need to anymore because they were locked in. So like, why are you spending? And again, yes, there's a lot of businesses that in our portfolio as well that suffered tremendously. We have a couple of travel, vacation, loyalty, miles platform. These pretty much are struggling these days. While we had a couple of logistics companies that grew explosively. In saying that, so we also opened the topic with pivot, and I think Sonia, one of your partners, came and did a pivot session to our portfolio companies, talk about pivots and stuff like that. Did you see any major companies or any of your investments pivot or add more features? Because that's also a very, pivotal point in this.
Nice.
So, did you see any of that happen with any of your portfolio companies?
Yeah, obviously Kitopi is one of our portfolio companies. So, they ended up going to the grocery delivery side of things as well from Cloud Kitchens. The other one that's regional is Mensa Labs, so 3D printing. So they went from targeting the oil and gas industry, 3D printing the nuts and bolts of the oil and gas industry. they completely shifted and started making what are they called? Face shields. So 3D printing face shields to address kind of at that point there was an issue with supply with the frontline workers, right? So he completely pivoted. Not to say that this is a long-term plan necessarily, but definitely one. The other one, it's not a portfolio company, but I guess it's more anecdotal. I have a friend who kind of, I guess, is a bit of a textile scion in India. And, he was quite afraid because, I mean, India kind of started, a bit later than this region, right? Really hitting kind of the market. And so he was really worried and he was like, I'm gonna have to lay off so many people and so many factories. And I was like, well, why don't you pivot? And that's what he ended up doing. And so now he's making PPE equipment and masks, antibacterial masks, etc., that he's actually selling now. So yeah, I think regardless of where you stand as an entrepreneur, whether it be a tech-enabled businesses or not, you have to keep an open mind and kind of be malleable in your approach. So, sometimes I've been on the receiving end of people whining, oh my gosh, this is going to destroy me, etc. And I'm like, no, why don't you look for an opportunity in this? Like, how can you shift your business model or shift even your product in order or kind of use the infrastructure you have to shift your product in order to actually address the challenge that we're all meeting on so many different levels. So we definitely have seen amongst our portfolio companies that have shifted and pivoted. And I think if anything, it's forced founders to kind of start thinking outside the box as well, which is good because we want that. I think as investors, you don't necessarily want to end up with a founder who's so kind of narrow-minded in their thinking and like, this is my vision and this is what we're going to do, etc. No, because you have these externalities that come into play and you need to kind of be quick on your feet in order to shift gear very fast and need to be open to that and need to be able to put your ego aside to say, okay, you know what, that vision that I had ain't going to work now. So I need to shift and focus on something else. And that actually it's not easy, especially, I mean, I'm sure Hasan and Raja have had similar encounters with founders who are very kind of like one-track minded. And it's kind of like my way or the highway. And, you don't necessarily, I personally would not invest in a founder who thinks that way. Like, you want someone who's kind of open-minded enough to understand that Hasan's going to give valuable advice, Raja's going to give valuable advice, take that into account. Don't necessarily need to apply the advice, but at least kind of acknowledge the advice and think about, reflect on the advice that's given in order to actually shift gears. So I think it's been interesting, to see kind of the founders that have been able to do that. It's also a reflection on the founders' kind of personalities as well, right? So I think a lot of us have gotten to know our founders at a much deeper level because of the kind of, we've had to kind of roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty as well. Raja mentioned kind of getting the founders together. That's something that we did mid-March already, where we actually created this AMA Ask Me Anything session for all our Saudi founders, for our Saudi portfolio companies. We got them all on a call that we hosted, and we kind of gave them our view on the next couple of months at that point. And then what was beautiful to see is then the founders started chiming in and saying, oh, okay, because they started talking about the issues that they were facing and finding synergies amongst themselves of how they could help each other out as well.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, like we have WhatsApp groups for every region's like founders, and I have to say, in the beginning of COVID, these WhatsApp groups were keeping me up at night because they were like people trying to help each other, and they were, like, why don't you do this for me and I'll do that for you. And there was a lot of that going on. Yeah. But also, kind of, I agree with you. Like when it comes to investing, usually because we only invest in very early startups as well. The best asset is the team, right? So, and we can sense people who are like technical, operational people, while people who really want to hustle and go out and make their business work. And this is something that I 100% back up with when saying that. We saw a
lot of founders had to make very difficult decisions, not just in this region. I have friends who are CEOs of very big tech companies in the US having to let go of a lot of people that they admire and respect. And so what we started seeing here, I'm sure all of us were recipients of were these lists, right? So we created a list internally for our portfolio companies, kind of like, who has to fire and who can hire, basically, based on what we were talking about earlier, kind of survival of the fittest, and trying to match make, essentially, kind of internally within our own portfolio. But then we saw lists, like Kareem had a list that was put together, a bunch of people that had to be let go. And then that's kind of a whole amazing pool of talent that's right there, so that the companies that are doing well can actually hire from as well. There were all these different lists that were circulating regionally and even like from other markets as well.
Yeah, we've had two companies merge in our portfolio.
There you go.
So, let's start. Let's go to Hasan, or do you want to go? Let's go with Raja first, and we'll go to Hasan last. Raja, like pivots. Did you see any?
I mean, okay, on the topic of pivots, obviously, if you're struggling, any company struggling, you've got to pivot and find a solution, right? I give you examples. A broader example is a company, an airline in Malaysia called AirAsia, which basically does low cost, the largest low cost carrier in the world. What the founder Tony Fernandez has done is, because of all his airlines have can't fly for the past 6 months, he's actually created new businesses, new technology businesses to actually kickstart a new growth story for the company, right? So he launched a platform called Our Farm, which basically sources produced directly from the farm. He launched an e-commerce platform during this time. And he launched a cargo business that basically fills up his empty plane capacity, right? So from his perspective is you find different stories to sell to investors so that you can survive or get through this time. And taking that example is that I think for my companies that are struggling during this time, that's what they are trying to do, right? So we invest in a travel business that does SME claims, SME claims and bookings for travel expenses. And what they've done is they've kind of pivoted to a more software model, so they can actually get a few corporate clients in and then charge them a more software business rather than just a cut of transactions of what they're doing earlier. So small things like that probably matter in terms of just getting, let's say, a couple $1 million in the bank account so you can survive throughout this time. And at the same time, for those who are doing well, I think the option of like mergers, acquiring smaller competitors comes to play. And given that if you can get your stock valued at a good price in this market, you can probably do a stock merger that will benefit both sides. So I think in terms of businesses, it's a good time because most founders are becoming very open to ideas. Even founders who are tough to deal with have to be realistic at this time and talk to investors and find solutions to the current issues, because this COVID situation affects, I think, 95% of businesses, right? And finding solution out of it is very important.
Okay. You do bring a great point. I know all about AirAsia because we did a project for them, and I know they were looking into this cargo space, and I know a lot of airlines actually took out their seats and started putting cargo instead of their seats. They had to get the flights up and running. So yeah, I've been seeing that. Hasan?
Yeah, so we've done so many deals that obviously some of them are going to pivot during this pandemic. I think what was interesting to see was, like Sonia said earlier, we were investing in great founders, and we got to really know the quality of our founders much better because of this difficult time. So there's some founders in industries where the industry itself, it's gone, like travel or something. But the founders just took the right steps and just like improved our level of confidence in what they're doing. And we know that they're going to bounce back the moment that the industry itself bounces back. Actually, there's a startup that I met the other day that essentially was in one of the frontline sort of industries that was affected by all the shutdowns, and has now recovered, almost V-shaped sort of recovery, back to where they were in Feb before all of everything got hit. So I think, the question of did we see pivots? Yes, we did see quite a few pivots, but what was the most important thing for me was, even for the startups that just couldn't pivot, there's nothing they could do in their industry. I think we really got to see the quality of the founders shine through. This, we sent out an email pretty early on, sometime in sort of March or something, saying, hey, listen, you guys need to have a contingency plan in place in case you don't make revenues and things go get worse. And then from that email, we got to see the founders that really took that to heart, implemented these sort of cost savings, more efficiencies, all of that sort of stuff. And we saw the founders that basically did nothing. And for those guys, we have no real sympathy. So, if you've been warned and there's something coming and, there's this email with advice of what you should be doing and you do nothing, then, you're on your own. Like,
It's
that's
on you.
basically it.
Sorry, add to that as well, because I think I agree with you, Hasan, that, kind of you're empowering the founders or providing them advice. I think one thing that maybe has not been addressed enough, at least in our region, I don't know about Southeast Asia, is having had conversations, including with Bahraini entrepreneurs. A lot of them, I mean, we're painting kind of a rosy picture, great time to invest, blah, 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 etc. But there's a lot of struggle happening on the ground. And yes, in some cases, I agree, Hasan, it's totally intentional and kind of, the ball is in their court and it's their doing. But in some cases, it's not. And I think one thing that I would like to see personally more of in this region is kind of addressing mental health amongst entrepreneurs, especially at this time. I had ended up having this conversation with this entrepreneur in Bahrain, and it was obviously the first part was like, this is, I'm struggling. He's definitely in that sector that's definitely being affected by COVID, but it morphed into this beautiful conversation about shame, like how ashamed he feels vis-a-vis of his, and this is a male entrepreneur, vis-a-vis, and Bahraini, vis-a-vis his in-laws, who, he left his cushy government job to take the entrepreneurial route, etc. Then we moved on from that to talking about spirituality and how COVID's brought him closer to Islam in his case, and how he felt like he had strayed from Islam, etc. And I was like, I came out of that conversation feeling dumbfounded, because I was like, in no way, shape, or form, in any normal situation would I've been able to have this type of depth of conversation with a male Bahraini entrepreneur as a female expat investor, And all this person needed was just a listening ear. I'm not a trained psychiatrist, but like just needed someone from the ecosystem who can empathize, who's not invested in the business, but who can kind of empathize and just listen. And I feel like this is something I would like to see more of kind of in this region. I know that in the US, a lot of VCs are partnering with kind of some of these kind of, outlets like health, telemedicine, whatever outlets, essentially to help their portfolio companies. We actually haven't seen that happen in this region. And of course, part of it is cultural. Everyone points to the, the fear of failure and the cultural, etc. But I think it maybe needs to be talked about, not maybe as openly as we would in the US, because it just wouldn't fit with the culture that we're in. But even if it's a little side conversation, one-on-ones like Hasan has, or Raja has, or I have, etc., little by little, if we can at least be there to help those that are actually too scared to talk about their struggles, I think that would be a nice step forward also for our ecosystem.
Yeah, that's actually something that we did. So we got together small groups of founders in different sectors that would sit, and they were very honestly talking about the issues that they were having, how stressed out they were, how uncertain everything was. And so they were a little bit like group therapy, and there was no real agenda. It was just, talk about whatever you want. And so it all came out. And I mean, one of the things I do is I just sit and listen whenever one of the founders so sometimes, founders send the email updates, and in the email, I'm like, there's something not entirely okay here. I just reach out, I'm like, hey, do you want to just talk? And so I've done that with a bunch of our founders, and they always really appreciate it, because honestly, there's nothing I can do, but they just need someone they can't talk to their employees. They can't talk to their spouse. They need someone just to vent, to talk about what's going on and the issues that they're having in their business. So totally agree with you, Sonia. But from day one, I realized that this is an issue. Like for the past 10 years, anytime a startup is talking about something that I'm like, this isn't really a big deal, but it seems like it's a big deal to them. And just listening is the best thing to do at that point in time. And so we also, we have a startup that is providing sort of video sort of consulting with mental health professionals and stuff. So they offered to the whole portfolio to sign up for a few sessions for free and all of that. So yeah, this is a pretty tough time mentally for everyone. But honestly, like it just feels like we're out of that now, right? It's just, I'm not too happy about it, but everyone is just sort of back to a new normal. Or like, yeah, let's meet up. I'm like, no, I really don't want to meet up. But where are you traveling next? Not anytime soon. That's not happening. So I think, there's different phases that we've been going through the pandemic. There was initial panic, and then there was, the realities of what's going on being hit, the sort of the downturns and all that sort of stuff. But now I feel like we're coming towards this area where, although there's still areas of panic that happen from day to day, but it's just generally, this is our lives now until there's a vaccine. And so it's interesting how quickly humans sort of respond to new environments that are not the normal and just make it the new normal. And that's what we're seeing at this point.
Definitely. I agree 100%. Like, I saw people that I never thought in my life use like grocery apps and stuff like that, now they're...
Or Zoom, like having to teach my mom how to use Zoom, like took me half an hour to explain, but I finally got her onto Zoom, which is great.
Yeah, my mom does workouts on Zoom now, which is like a miracle.
Yeah, don't laugh. My family's on Slack, all of them.
Wow, you have a Slack workspace? That's a step up, dude. Like, I don't know if my mom would understand Slack.
No, she gets the whole coding bit, but because, we're in tech, me and my brother and Mike, so we just installed it for them. And just because, I know there was a lot of channels that were open, but, this one was much easier to use for everybody.
But that would help streamline a lot of family conversations. That's actually an excellent idea, rather than having a family WhatsApp where everything gets muddled.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can have channels, if you want to talk about a brother or a sister that you don't want to talk about. So yeah, COVID did change us and did change a lot of that. Okay, I have another question, and maybe we can open it up. So let's talk about trends and the future. Like, where do you think the investments are going to go, and which verticals? What are you guys looking at? What do you think is very popular, or what do you think is going to become popular? Who wants to start this?
Rajas would start.
Roger, you should start.
Sure. Okay, based on what I'm seeing on my plate, right? I mean, the few sectors that will continue to do well. Number one, I would say EdTech will be a big driver of growth in this Southeast Asian region. If you look at sorry. Okay, can you still see me? Okay. Yeah. So if you look at the Southeast Asian region, it's like Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, they're all still developing countries. And in most of those countries, delivery of content has grown through virtual methods, right, because of COVID. So you're talking about a few hundred million people who are coming online. And if you take a percentage of them who are students, let's say 10-20%, it's a big population that needs EdTech to actually bridge that gap. And if you look at EdTech for the past 5-6 years in the region, it's been actually very slow to adopt because obviously it's relatively expensive compared to just teachers, and given labor is pretty cheap around this part of the world. So I do find that this will be a strong catalyst for most schools, especially on the public side, to upskill themselves and grow. And the second part where I see a big trend is still, I think traditionally e-commerce is always sexy, but it's gone. I think you go into more niche, it'll go to more niche verticals of e-commerce, right? So I think your big platform plays like Shopee or Amazon and all have already gotten their moat. But I think now you go into deeper verticals, whether it's, let's say, halal fashion, whether it's healthy food. I think those, like, go to the next layer where you see consumers being more appreciative of going online. I see numbers in Korea, for example, where it's a very established e-commerce market, and the e-commerce sales has gone up by 30%, right? So these are big numbers and big quantums that you see. Other than that, I think healthcare will still be a big trend. You see more people prioritizing the delivery of healthcare services to the broader population. And given there's a huge population play in this region, we invested in a company called Naluri, which does healthcare programs for corporates, for example. And given that everyone is being more health conscious and COVID accelerates that awareness, I find that there'll be a big growth in this sector moving forward. So I think those are the few sectors that I like. Obviously, there's any good businesses that come on board and I see on my radar, I'm always open to investing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hasan, I'm gonna put you on the spot this time.
You're on mute. Story of our lives.
I wasn't making a sound earlier.
Oh.
No, I'm joking. So the what sectors is always a question which I'm like, I hate that question, because we don't really look at we don't have like a sector top down sort of philosophy of, yeah, we think, you know, these sectors are going to be amazing or great or whatever. It's, you know, our investment at seed stage is really very closely linked to, are these good founders going after a problem that they really understand, and there isn't a lot of people that are crowding that market. And so, yeah, we're going to continue following that sort of bottom up sort of philosophy when it comes to sector. Because, you know, even when you talk about sectors, you're like, oh, travel has been hit, but no, travel hasn't all been hit. We have some internal travel companies in Saudi, for instance, that have done really, really well in this period. And then you're like, oh, grocery delivery is doing amazing. No, there's some grocery delivery companies which are not doing amazing. And so it's just like that whole sort of mindset of, I know as an investor what the best sector is going to be. I don't know anything, man. Really, the founders who are building startups in that sort of industry know a lot better than I do. And if they're good founders and they really are passionate about what they're working on, that's what we're gonna sort of fund, whether they're in ag tech or even whether they're growing bugs. Like, you know, we've done an investment in bugs for protein as a source, and I don't know anything about that, but it's you know, they're really passionate about bugs, these guys. So Proteinia out of Egypt.
I spoke to them.
Yeah, they're great guys. They love bugs, and so I like, it's not, you know, I don't know anything about that industry, but generally, like, that's the case. I think backing a good founder, regardless of whatever sector they're in, whatever industry they're going after, is probably the most important thing at seed stage, more than anything else. And so, you know, I can come up with all of these nice things. Like, yeah, the buckets are going to be these sort of companies in content or in e-commerce and logistics and stuff. And they're very obvious things, right? Like, we don't have these things. And so a startup that's providing those services is going to do really well. But yeah, it's been eye-opening, honestly. Like, who really knows? Like, and that's baked into our investment thesis, which is great.
Honestly, like you said a great, like, you know, you're backing the people because, you know, you want to know how, you know, that also addressed what we talked about earlier with the pivot. You know, you're looking after people who really want to keep things going, you know, and especially at the early age startups. I'm telling you, I founded a couple of companies. I can tell you, one of my companies started with one thing and now they do completely differently. We once backed a company that did inspection for tires, and now they just got the patent for in microscopes to detect cancer nodes, you know, in humans. So like, they majorly pivoted. So there's a lot, but they're good founders, and they you know, they adapted their business accordingly. So Sonia, same question to you. I know you had a couple of things earlier today, but you know, I want to hear your.
No, I mean, I totally 100% agree with what Hasan said. I'm also a bit tired of the question of, like, you know, kind of what's next, what should we keep our eye on? I mean, what we're focused on, I can tell you, half of the team is focused on regional fintech because we believe that there's an acceleration happening in this region and we want to be a part of that story. So that's what half of the team is focused on. The other half, which is me and the rest of the team, is focused on conscious investing, which I believe is the future of investing. So I think people are going to realize that they want to give their money more purpose and more impact. And back to what Hasan was saying about backing those types of founders, I want to back those entrepreneurs that are actually wanting to make a difference, without sounding cheesy, but wanting to make a difference in this world, really harnessing the power of technology to optimize societal, environmental good and financial inclusion. And so this is, I guess, not that I'm that old, but I am at that juncture where I'm starting to reflect on myself and kind of what I want my legacy to be. And I don't know if that's something that all of you guys have done, that exercise. What is it that you want your legacy to be once you've departed this planet, this dunya? that is something that I've been reflecting on recently, and you know, I want that to be my legacy, I guess, in the end, without sounding dramatic. I want to be able to empower that next generation of entrepreneurs who want to accelerate meaningful change, and so that's why I'm going to put my dollars towards, and hopefully encourage others to do so from the region as well, which is why we're doing this fellowship.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. I have to agree with all of you. You know, like we are seeing a couple of trends in obviously investments in what I call the now. You know, like the logistics, the e-commerce, because suddenly they got a huge influx of traffic. But we're also listening. Like I think yesterday when Sonia, you and I spoke, we're getting a lot of people also very interested in this cybersecurity space because there's been a lot of people who are trying new platforms who are still not that active online. So there was a lot of breaches when it came to that. In saying that, I think, sorry, Hamzah, you wanted to say something?
I was saying that I think the point of note for startups is like you don't know when something like this hits or when something happens that can go either way, right? It's a binary thing, right? It can be very beneficial to you, it can be totally detrimental to you, right? But if you have an investor who's interested and there's money on the table, to me in this environment, I was just telling one of my startups earlier today, he has a term sheet at a value that he doesn't like, but I said just take it at this time, right? Still an uplift in valuation. Don't be greedy. Even though you think you're in a sexy space at this time, things can change in 3 months and the world becomes normal again after a vaccine and you can't get the value that you want, right? So I think startups listening out there, this is not the time to be fussy. I think this is the time to be realistic. Even though you're in a good space now, you may not be in a few months. So it's always something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a whole entire topic. We talk about valuations. I know, you know, like I'm sure all of you have this discussion with all the founders. You know, there's always this negotiation that happens, but that's an entirely new panel, I guess, that we can talk about. I think we're just approaching our time right now. So if anybody wants to add their last remarks or points to the founders, to the investors, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your final thoughts on this. Let's start with you, Sonia.
No, please no. I'd like to start with Hasan. I'm still thinking. You didn't prepare us. I gave my final words of wisdom. I said, choose to give money more purpose and more impact.
I have to agree with you, kind of. So, well then, I'm gonna give it to Raja again. So, final.
Another thing, like when someone says like final words, I don't really know what to say. But I mean, if my audience is startups out there, to me, I think most startups are probably more than 50% will be struggling through this time. Just persevere through. I mean, as VCs, we may seem like sharks when we come to you and try to, I guess, push down your valuation or try to work through some of the issues that you have. But at the same time, I mean, if you can manage yourself through this time, and I've seen a lot of founders who manage to try to pivot or manage to find different revenue sources, or just find ways to survive, right? I think if you survive 2020 and you have like a flat year, I think that's really a very good outcome. So I think even for as a VC in my fundraising, which is honestly is an extremely tough time to fundraise, just got to double down and always try to have meaningful conversations with your investors. And I think this goes through all companies across the world. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Okay, Hasan.
Yeah, I don't know, like words of wisdom. I'm not that wise, so I guess.
Oh, so humble, Hasan.
Words of experience, I guess. You know, the white hairs are showing. It's just, I think, you know, if you're a startup that's just getting started during this period, it's probably the best time for you to start because you're going through the most difficult part that you probably will have during, you know, your startup. So keep at it, and hopefully we'll be able to invest and support some of you guys going forward. If you're a startup going through a tough time, I think, you know, it's everyone's going through something difficult right now. Just keep up the perseverance. If you really believe in what you're working on, this too shall pass, and things will normalize at some point in time. And so it should, you know, we just gotta keep keep working towards the future and keep thinking about, what really is the change that you want to sort of, I guess, stealing from Sonia, what change you want to make in the world. It's hard, but no one said it was going to be easy. So keep it up.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you guys for a wonderful discussion. I know we've opened up a couple of interesting topics, especially, I know you guys know I have a show called The Pivotal Show, but that's a different issue. So that's why I had to bring in the pivot into this discussion. And I loved your insights on what's happening in the region and what happened with you guys at the COVID times. And it was something that we've never experienced before, that's for sure. So again, thank you very much for all of you for showing up. Thank you for having this wonderful discussion. And I guess engagement is, please reach out to me or to any of these panelists if you want. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing your insights and creating an amazing discussion on the investors' investment trends. I'm sure our startups have picked up a lot from today's discussion. To our audiences, if you would like to connect with our speakers, please move to the home lobby page. You can find the speakers by typing their names under Networking tab on the right hand of your screen. We welcome all of our audience to interact with each other on our chat wall. Please stay tuned as we have an exciting panel coming up with key investors who focus on investing in health tech startups and discussing their investment trends.